Welcome to a Legendarium special about Jemmy Wood, a banker who helped to inspire the character of Ebenezer Scrooge. Charles Dickens visited the city of Gloucester during his reading tours and described it as a wonderful and misleading city. He wrote of Gloucester docks, "You will see suddenly appearing, as if in a dream, long ranges of warehouses with cranes attached, endless intricacies of dock, miles of tram road, wildernesses of timber in stacks, and huge three-masted ships wedged into little canals, floating with no apparent means of propulsion and without a sail to bless themselves with." Gloucester also may have inspired one of his most famous characters, Ebenezer Scrooge. During his time there, Dickens learned of a wealthy but miserly banker named James Wood, but often called Jemmy Wood, who had become known as the richest commoner in His Majesty's dominions. We know for certain that Dickens knew of Jemmy Wood, for he referred to a man named Dismal Jemmy in his first novel, The Pickwick Papers, and mentioned him again in Our Mutual Friend. So, who is this Jemmy Wood? He was born in 1756. Wood inherited an old-fashioned hardware shop from his father around the beginning of the 19th century. The corner of this shop hosted the Old Country Bank, one of the oldest banks in the region, founded in 1716. Despite being illiterate, Wood proved himself a shrewd moneylender. He invested in a wide range of enterprises, including an undertaking business and vast real estate holdings in and around his hometown of Gloucester. Wood offered no interest to depositors for 1 year in order to lure them into his bank, and he also pinched his pennies to help himself amass wealth. Rather than hire more men, he kept only 2 clerks and often worked the bank personally to avoid having to pay salaries. To deter forgers, Wood nailed counterfeit bills to the countertop. And though good at money, he hated spending it. Wood never spent money on clothes and often looked shabby and grubby, wearing the same garb for years on end. The Gloucester miser also shunned public transport to save his precious pennies. He regularly traveled from Tewkesbury in the rain while on foot, being too cheap to pay for a carriage. Once a hearse stopped and asked him if he wanted a lift, so he climbed into the back with the coffin. He also went down to the docks to fill his pockets with coal that tumbled off the ships rather than pay for it. One story says a fellow traveler refused to believe that the Raggedy Wood had any money in the bank. Wood wagered that he could withdraw £100,000 when they arrived in Gloucester, and when Wood withdrew such fat stacks, the incredulous traveler had no choice but to hand over the £5. For good reason, he became known as the Miser of Gloucester. Yet Wood had something to show for his penny pinching. Upon his death in 1836, at age 80, he left an estate worth £50 million in modern money. That did not buy him popularity, though, and Wood had become widely hated within Gloucester because of his harsh business practices. During his funeral procession, the streets lined with people who booed and threw stones at his coffin as it passed. Today, nothing remains of the miser except his grave at St. Mary de Crypt and the blue plaque currently outside a local McDonald's. Though one could argue he leaves a legacy as a cautionary tale in the form of Ebenezer Scrooge. It seems that Wood also helped to spark Dickens' creativity for another novel called Wood's badly written will. This will led to a bitter disagreement which included the Gloucester city government over who should receive his money. The various beneficiaries became mired in a long and drawn-out lawsuit. During the long struggle, a damaged codicil appeared, which led Wood's solicitor and beneficiary, John Chadbourne, to commit suicide. A magazine wrote that during the months leading up to his death, Chadbourne had become obsessed with the codicil and what it might mean for the legacy he struggled for years to obtain. And in a final tragic irony, most of Wood's estate would be swallowed up by legal fees, which would no doubt have broken Wood's heart. And it is worth reflecting that Jemmy Wood worked his entire life and put himself through much hardship to amass money, yet not only could he not take it with him after his death, but it ultimately benefited nobody but the lawyers who squabbled over the carcass of his fortune. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.